Hey, fellow nerds and nerdlings. This is OmniDog. Thanks for tuning in to OmniDog's Vault, where today it's root beer reviews. And we're starting out with a nice little bouquet, little bottle of Sprecher root beer. If you're from Wisconsin in the United States, you know this root beer well. It's practically a religion up there in Wisconsin. Let's take a taste of Sprecher root beer. Mmm. Tastes like maybe it's got a little honey in it. Not too much vanilla. Some herbs and spices. Very good. This is a big, large bottle of root beer, but I'm very happy with the taste. I'll knock this back tonight. So there's the root beer part of the vid. You're probably wondering, is that all? Well, if you turn it off right now, that's all. But if you want to keep going, we're going to review some books. Or I am. I don't know who the we're is, but I'm going to review some books. And they're mostly under the radar this time, but I think they're highly worth reading. And the very first book I'm going to talk about is one I had never heard about before. I like the description, and it is Kingsway West. It's by Dark Horse, and as you can see on the front, it's got a dragon on it. I have two words for you: Supernatural Wild West. That's three words. Okay, three words for you: Supernatural Wild West. Anything with 1800s Western America with magic in it or supernatural, occult, something in it. I love that genre. It is so cool. And let me spend just 2 seconds reading the description of this book because it's very interesting. The main protagonist's name, right there in the front, a Chinese sharpshooter named Kingsway West. After spending 13 years in a war that made him a monster, a Chinese gunslinger named Kingsway Law just wants to live in peace with his wife, Sonia. But even in a fantastical Old West crackling with magic, a man of his skills can never quite disappear. So when a woman with a red gold sword brings bloody chaos to his doorstep, Kingsway must fight for his life, his wife, and his very soul. That's right, there's a mystical um, element called red gold that has been discovered in the Wild West. This is back in the mid 1800s in an alternate version of the US, where there are things like the United States of New York, Indian nation states. Here is a map of what it looks like in the West. As you can see, there is the Golden Mountain Empire, which is run by the Chinese, and down below it is the Mexican-controlled República de los Californios, and they get involved in a 13-year war around this red gold, which has magical, mysterious properties, and um, there's dragons, there's winged soldiers, there's airships, and this red gold that is able to imbue, uh, give the soldiers their wings. It's able to create magical swords, and it's written by Greg Pak, so you know it's going to be good. Greg Pak is one of the really, really fine writers today, and here we have some pictures of it. So you can see how good this art is. This art is really good. Let me show you a little bit more. Let's see if we can get something with some dragons in it. Well, here's one with an airship that comes down. So that's pretty cool. Um, this gunslinger, as it says in the description, just wants to live his life in peace. But he keeps getting dragged into. He has a very altruistic nature. He keeps getting dragged into other people's fights, and it turns out. Let me see. I don't want to give too much away. The main antagonist in it wants to find all the red gold that he can and use it for nefarious purposes. And Kingsway gets drafted into this battle so that this guy won't get his hands on all the red gold, because if you control the red gold, you control all the magical properties and everything that goes along with it. And Kingsway is an amazing shot, and he, as I said, the Chinese go into a 13-year war with the Mexican army, and once peace is kind of a peace is established, he falls in love with and marries one of the enemy, a Mexican woman, and just wants to live a peaceful life. This is the start of fantastic world building. That's probably the only frustrating thing about this book, is that it is only 4 issues long, and I have been able to find no sign anywhere that it's going to continue, which would be a real tragedy, because there's so much you can do with this book, with Kingsway and his allies. His wife goes missing. He's on a search for her. A Chinese woman that's run away from the Chinese section turns up with a magical sword and is his ally for the rest of the book. And this can go so many places that I really hope this is just the beginning of a 50-issue run for this book. It is wonderfully magic and incredibly, the world building, as I said, is just starting, and there's so much that can be done with it. I highly recommend this book for the great writing and the great art in it, and the wonderful sense of something happening, getting in on the ground floor of something really interesting happening here. If you like comic books just in general, you will like this book. I can pretty much guarantee it. As I said, the only bummer, it's only 4 issues. But it's worth it. It's 4 issues that are a lot of fun. And so I highly recommend Kingsway West. It gets 5 out of 5 root beers. Now, the next books that we're going to review is a book that I hadn't really heard very much of. I've got volumes 1 and 2, Vertigo series, called Unfollow. And the premise here is there's a very close to death, he's on his deathbed, multi-billionaire, Silicon Valley type tycoon who randomly picks 140 people to inherit his fortune. All strangers, they inherit his fortune. But the catch is, if one of them dies, their fortune doesn't go to their family. The fortune reverts to the other existing, still living members of the original 140. So what you've got is a combination. If you've ever read the short story, The Most Dangerous Game, it's kind of The Most Dangerous Game mixed with Social Network. It is a book. Let me see if I can get some artwork here to show you. It's very nicely drawn with a very nice color palette. It involves, here's the Iranian journalist. It involves some of the protagonists. There's a lot of protagonists, but the author, Rob Williams, who I am not familiar with, there are a number of people in this that, as you can imagine, with 140 characters that get chosen for this money, there's an awful lot of characters, and he does a good job of fleshing them out and making them interesting and making you care about them. There is kind of a rich, spoiled girl that gets all the snappy lines in the book. She steals the book. She's one of the ones that inherit it. There's a gun-toting guy that thinks God talks to him. He's one of the ones that inherits some of the money, um, gets picked for the money. There's a kid trying to get out of a gang situation, a Japanese performance artist, um, and these are some of the people that have been chosen for the money. There's also a very mysterious antagonist who I don't want to say too much about because I don't want to give him away, and I'm not really sure of his intentions yet because this book is 2 volumes so far, and the third volume is going to come out in a little while. So you may want to wait until the third volume comes out, but it could be a multi issue run. I don't know what the plans are for this. I just grabbed the first two because I had heard from some people that it was a good read. Um, it's kind of a major social experiment by the Silicon Valley type. And as you might guess, people slowly start dying and the fortune starts building up for the remaining 140, 136, whatever it gets down to. The money ends up, building up to them, and they get it in increments, um, so they don't get it all in one shot. But the art is really, really good in it. It reminds me a little bit of Frank Quitely's art, and the story itself reminds me a little bit about Grant Morrison's writing. Um, so, um, as the people start to die, the existing people try to figure out how it's happening, who's after them, who's trying to do it. And it's really cool the way they find out their fortune, that they're one of the fortune inheritors. An app all of a sudden shows up on their phone that just says 140. And I guess the 140 is sort of an homage to Twitter, 140 characters. But then as people start to get picked off, the countdown begins on the phone, like 138. And it's a really well thought out sort of social experiment. The only frustrating part, of course, is like the thing with Kingsway West. It's not complete. It's still got a ways to go. But I found a lot to like in this book. Um, as I said, the main strength of this book is all the characters that are introduced are very fleshed out, and you get to care about them, and you want to know what happens to them. So I give this book 4.5 root beers. The only reason it doesn't get 5 is because I don't know when it's going to finish. I don't know how it's going to finish, but I give it 4.5 out of 5 root beers. So Unfollow is the name of this book by Vertigo, and it's very Vertigo-ish, so you may want to check it out. Now, the last book we're going to talk about is a book we can only talk about. I can't review it because I don't know how to review it. I don't know what happened in this book. I don't know how it happened. I know that it was a lot of fun, but to read this book, you are going to need to be willing to experiment. You're going to need to have kind of a sense of wonder. You're really going to have to suspend your disbelief. You're going to have to be willing to kind of play along, go with the flow, and see what happens. And I'm talking about, of course, Doom Patrol by Gerard Way. In the afterword, he even says that a reviewer said he couldn't review it, that all you can do is experience it. And that's really about all I can tell you about Doom Patrol, because it is the original Doom Patrol written by Grant Morrison, which was a great book, but it's dialed up to about 10 from there. So it's even wackier and more tangential and goes on some very trippy trips. The art is really neat in it. I really dug the art. It's very effective. You've got aliens. You've got Danny the Street, who's become Danny the World now. You've got all kinds of weird, wacky concepts. The main protagonist in it is an EMT driver. That's the one part that's grounded in reality, but her life quickly takes a turn for the craziest when she gets involved with the beginnings of the Doom Patrol. Um, it's it's an experience. I think that for the more open-minded reader, you will get a kick out of. If you like your stories more linear, if you like your stories with a beginning, middle, and end, a little more traditional stories, you may not dig this. Um, but an awful lot happens in this first book. A lot of interesting stuff happens. Um, I personally am open to that kind of wacky weirdness. I like Grant Morrison, and I like Gerard Way's the first book I ever read of his was Umbrella Academy, volumes 1 and 2. So I'm open to that, but you might not be. So you may want to download a couple copies from Comixology, the first 2 issues, see what you think. I also know that I believe that this comes out kind of irregularly. They are, I am having trouble, irregularly. They, I believe, got behind on schedule. They didn't really publish this with any kind of consistency, so I don't know when the second volume is going to come out, and I only read collected editions, so it could be a while before I get any type of second volume of this so I can know what's happened. It does build on some elements from Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol, but you don't need to know a thing about that book if you want to try this book. It's worth a shot if you're interested in a little bit of mind-bending, excuse me, exhilarating kind of weird wackiness. I can't tell you about subtext. I can't tell you about context. I can't tell you about layering. I I I don't know. It was just a rager of a book that I thought was kind of cool. So on one level, it gets 4 out of 5 root beers, and on another level, it gets about 2 out of 5 root beers. Um, just because I need a second volume to tie up some loose ends in this thing. But I think it's worth a shot if you are open to it. So that is Root Beer Reviews for today. I appreciate everybody tuning in. I appreciate all your comments. And if you have books that you'd like me to review, feel free to put them in the comments below. I try to read as many books as I can and give the reviews to you guys. So thanks for supporting me. Thanks for supporting the channel. I appreciate all your subscriptions, and please subscribe. And this is OmniDog saying good night, good morning, good day, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks.